Today's Wholiness Connection features my conversation with Malar Ganapathiappan. Let me tell you a little more about Malar. Malar considers writing as a path for healing and connection to one's deeper self. She helps people who've always felt different to reclaim themselves. By bringing more of who they are at a soul level into their life, they release their masks and experience true connection. She's a body-centered writing and life coach with a psychology degree and certifications in energy healing, coaching, and trauma support. Since 2008, she's worked with people in every step of the messy creative process to tell their stories. She offers individual coaching and group events. Learn more at her website, which is her name. I'll put that in the notes for this episode. And as I think you can tell from that introduction, we had quite an interesting conversation about writing and its interconnections with the spiritual journey. Hey everyone, today I am so happy to have with me my friend and fellow writer and fellow traveler on the spiritual path, Malar. We're going to talk a little bit about writing and the spiritual connections to the spiritual journey in various ways today. I have a conversation about that, and I just wanted to start with a quote. This is a quote by Stephen Dobbins of the Washington Post when talking about the Chilean poet Pablo Neruda. And he said about Neruda that according to Neruda, it was through metaphor, not rational analysis and argument, that the mysteries of the world could be revealed. And so I just thought that sort of popped into my life somewhere. I can't even remember where I saw it yesterday, and it just felt like it was relevant to today. So I thought I would start with that. I think that it's been true for me that a lot of times I've done at least a lot of processing and integrating in my life through writing. I'm thinking maybe especially of psychological processing, but spiritual too. Do you feel this similarly, or?
Well, I feel like writing is it's such a deep part of my heart. I feel like I consider writing to be part of my identity, and like as a writer, and that's just like the way that I've used to understand myself in the world, like through stories and just through journaling, and of course, like writing about who I am, what I want, and the journey that I've been on.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's so many components to writing. So there's like the universal connection with humans because we have these universal threads in our stories, and there's also the details that are more unique. And there's a way that writing, I feel like for me, it helps me connect both with myself and with something beyond the physical reality. Like I've had times where like I'm writing and I'm in the flow, and then a word or a phrase will pop out that I didn't even know that I knew. Like I don't remember ever having heard that word before. And yeah, it comes out in the writing, and it's just like organically flowing out onto the page. And then later I might look it up and be like, what does that word mean? Am I using it right? And then it is like the context, it actually fits really well. And I feel like there's times like that where I feel like I'm tapping in to something beyond with writing. And that's really cool because it's like, there's ways that writing uses the mind where we can be like a little more linear, like we could be reflecting on like thoughts and feelings. But then there's also like these moments like this where it feels like it's when I'm in that space of like organic openness, receptivity to something greater, and in the flow of it, then these things just happen. And these new, like it could be insights, it could be different like the idea of metaphor, right? It could be things that help me make sense of things without having to be linear and direct, but it's kind of magical, I gotta say.
Yeah. When you said that word flow, that's what I was sort of thinking even before you said that word, is that, like a lot of other things can be flow states too, but I think very much, and I don't know, people who may not have written as much may not be familiar with how writing can be that way, but it really can, now however much writing you've done, it doesn't also mean you have to be a professional writer by any means. It's just whatever writing that one does, you really can enter that kind of a flow state with it. And then who knows what will emerge. It is really magical, I think. That's definitely happened to me. at various stages of my journey with writing. I also felt like such a connection in how you were talking about writing, just to how other parts of the spiritual journey feel too. Um, even when I think of how I sort of almost feel for a metaphor sometimes when I'm writing, um, it doesn't feel that different from sort of like how I feel into an energetic space, for example. It feels um, kind of similar in that way to like other aspects of feeling into whatever we want to call that, like whatever that holistic space is or energetic space, flow state space, whatever that is. It definitely feels akin to me.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that feeling, the that's like such a key component for me in writing. It's like connecting with the feeling of the words. Like I feel like words have resonance. So there's not they're not just like these, text on a page or a screen. I feel like there's an energy behind words as well. So I feel like like what I've learned personally is both in my spiritual journey and in writing is that when I'm like tuned into myself and my inner self and kind of turn inwards and listening to this inner voice in me and like feeling into what feels most alive, what feels most like resonant or like juicy, exciting, or even just like peaceful and quiet. Like it doesn't have to be intense and like really, I don't know, it doesn't have to have a lot of energy, though, of course, it often does. But sometimes it's like these quiet moments where I feel like there's just this deeper feeling to it that the words have a different like there's a different experience between writing words from a more like heady mental place, like intellectual, and a more feeling like heart space. And I don't want to pit like the head and heart against each other necessarily. I think there's writing that, of course, can come from both those places. But I do find that writing from this heart space, it makes me feel more connected to the words. Like I feel more calmer and peaceful. And also like when I read it back, it just feels better. Like there's less of that. I mean, I know in writing, a lot of times, like we don't feel like good writers, or like I feel like that's one of the most common thing people say to me, that they don't feel like they're good
Mhm.
enough, and they kind of downplay their experience of writing and their writing itself. But there's something about being in the feeling of the words and having that, like being fully immersed in this experience of connecting with some idea or concept or whatever it is, and expressing that in its fullest in that moment. And this this is starting to be kind of hard to explain, to put into words, because it is such a feeling experience.
Mhm.
But I found that like the
Yeah.
result of writing from this place is this deep connection. And like I know that when I read words like in a book or someone else's words like on a screen, I can tap into these feelings and bring out these different parts of me that maybe I wasn't even aware of that existed. But there's something about that connection to
Mhm.
what's being written that can like wake things up inside of me, which I think is also really cool that that writing allows us to do, because it is a language for communication and this connection both to ourselves and to like our soul self, like who we really are, that goes beyond our habits and patterns and our like little our human things that kind of get in the way sometimes and prevent us from tapping into this deeper feeling, and also others, like that connection with others through our words.
Yeah. Wow. I want to take that so many directions. Let's see which one to start with. Because I definitely want to talk about the connection to others piece. Before I do that, first, just to note, like what you were saying, I think is true that there are different ways to write. And I think that, what we are talking about right now is that whatever you want to call it, writing from the heart, maybe. It's not that the head isn't involved, but we are talking about sort of going into either that flow state or kind of that deeper kind of intention of being receptive and connecting, I think, in some way. Um, and then I think, I guess before I get to the part about connecting to others, you mentioned sort of well, kind of almost both parts, right? I guess it's sort of co-creative in a way, because it kind of feels like something expressed that could express through us that we're receiving. It's also this way of expressing sort of maybe the most authentic parts of ourselves, really. Um, and even in that case, something can come up that's surprising, right? And I know we've talked before about how that it can be just, I think your words were something like, it can be just about being you, and like the fear and the judgment can just drop away if you really, when we're really using writing as this kind of a process, almost a spiritual kind of a process, rather than worrying about the product. Um, and so I think that, I guess that's reminding me also of what you said about people often, like, being worried about the product, or if they're good enough and how they're writing it. So it's interesting to think of it as maybe almost a spiritual practice that someone could do, um, where, especially in that case, they would be really aware that it's the process, and that it's really about seeing how receptive they can be, and also like, that authenticity piece, I guess, just like no judgment, no fear. This is me kind of thing, just in whatever's expressing.
Mhm. And that, I think the word you use, practice, like, I think that's definitely a practice. I've been talking a lot recently about conditioning and how it like disconnects us from ourselves, because I feel like a lot of people who come to me are struggling with some part of writing and expressing themselves, and knowing who they are on a deeper level and being able to turn inwards. I think there's so many ways these days to have like, meditation, or ways to drop in and hear our like deeper voice, from our inner self. And maybe that's our heart or soul, like whatever, our body. And I feel like I want to kind of normalize the disconnect. I mean, it's not a great thing. Like, it doesn't feel great, but I just want to like normalize that it comes from there's a reason that a lot of us feel disconnected. And I think that comes from conditioning. It's conditioning to be disconnected from ourselves. Like, in terms of writing, it could be from, like, in school, we learn through academics, like, we get graded and we're told like what's good and what's bad. And, we learn through those experiences, evaluations and grades, and rubrics, how to write. And sometimes the that can actually disconnect us from what we really want to say, and like we feel like, oh, this is the way that writing should be. So I feel like this kind of goes into the spiritual journey in general as well. Like, it's a practice, right, of being ourselves. I feel like bringing more of who we are into our lives, who we are on a deeper level, and really expressing our truth, speaking our truth, and being in our truth. Like, those are things that are also like a practice through writing, because um, we're so conditioned to like look for an external authority, on how to write and what to write about. Like, we're used to maybe having school, like in school we have like assignments to write. Okay, this is what you're going to write about, and this is what you need to have in your writing. And this the more like a spiritual writing practice is more about being receptive and being more connected to who we are. And it can be really challenging actually to tap into. And I just want to normalize that, because it
Hmm.
does take practice, and it may not be something that anyone can get into immediately, into that flow state. But it's like finding those ways to get into that deeper space, like finding whatever it is that is your path to get into there. And I think that quote that you
Yeah.
mentioned in the beginning, it's like tapping into the mystery and the magic of life. Like, it's out there, and sometimes we just have to pause and get a little quieter to be able to hear it.
Yeah. And I think other spiritual type practices could help us get in. Um, and sort of using them as a model could also help us get in. So both thinking of it that way, that it's more like a meditation or more like something like that if we're trying to write as a spiritual practice. But that I used to do my meditating before I wrote. So I don't know. Do you feel like you have particular practices that you do?
I think
before you write?
yeah, like I feel like sometimes I can write my way into the deeper place. Like I can start just
Hmm.
writing and then I can feel that like once it, I think the key is tapping into the feeling of it. So if I start and I notice, oh, I'm
Hmm.
like all over the place here. I'm scattered. I'm not really connected with the words on the page. I'm just kind of like all over the place. Like if I notice that, then I can like slow myself down a
Hmm.
little bit and then maybe take a breath or maybe just keep writing and keep like seeing where does it feel a little more like expansive? Where does it feel a little more constricted?
Hmm.
And like using that as I'm
Hmm.
going to kind of to act as like a GPS, like to see which direction should I head in today. And it so I can do it as I'm going. And sometimes that's all that's needed. But it does require like that feeling more present with what's what's happening. Because I know I've definitely had times when I'm just writing and it feels more like rumination, like it feels more like a spiral, like it's just
Hmm.
going on, and it's not really. Yeah, it doesn't have that feeling in my body, and that's part of like
Hmm.
where the work that I do around being body centered and like being present with our bodies, which is again one of those like difficult things for many of us. So it's
Hmm.
like it seems like that's the key, though. That's the key to being able to tap into that space.
Yeah, that's so important. I wonder if you could say a little more about that. I'm not sure if I think I have I'm doing that naturally, like feeling in probably to my body and being centered and all of that, but I haven't always thought of it consciously as embodiment. So I'm wondering, yeah, like how do you see the body as involved sort of in the process, I guess?
Mm. Well, one exercise that I have done is it's an interoceptive exercise, which means like it's a turning inwards, and that's to feel into the heartbeat without touching your chest. So this is like it's connecting
Oh.
with the body, like the inner body. It's like turning inwards, and what that lets you do is be able to feel into like the inner workings of yourself a little more and there's like gosh like there's so much with the body. Let's see, so that's one of them. Another one is the through movement. So it's taking on the like body position. So say you're feeling really stuck and um like one of like an exercise that I might have a client do is if they're stuck, like to take on the position with their body of what that stuck looks like. So they might like curl up in a ball. They might like um I don't know, like cover their face or something. Like it's what does that feel
Mm.
like? And like when you take it on in the body, you can use that as the cue to see to get more information about what's coming up, and from there you can kind of play with that a little bit. You can work with it. So if that's like we could come back to metaphors, right? What does this look like on a like if we were to use a metaphor for what this feels like in the body, what is that? And then through those movements, through those exercises of moving the body, of taking on the shape of how you're feeling, just letting the body move the way that it wants to move, and like just being curious and open to what it has to say. I feel like our bodies have so much wisdom. As someone with like chronic conditions and chronic pain, I know that like this is one of the the things on my spiritual journey. Like coming back to that, it's like learning how to work with the body and
Mhm.
everything I do, because I know that if I don't, like it's just like you can't really do like I feel like I just can't do the things I want to do if I'm not aware and attuned with my body. So the point of those like exercises is to get more information and to use the body as a way, like as a tool to see what's present, what's here. And then from there, like that, those things can be written down. Like you could just write, like, okay, this is what came up, and kind of go from there. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. I think this is brilliant. I think of the body a lot now, not in the past, but like now in my spiritual journey, especially, and embodiment practices and all that. I still never had connected it in that way, in that deep of a way, though, to writing and the flow of writing, and almost thinking of them as separate spiritual practices. So it's so easy to separate things out into different domains, but those sound really powerful, basically. So I think I'm so glad you mentioned them and offered them to us here. I'm definitely going to be trying some of those.
Yeah, and I think that there's
And
like,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the thing with writing is that it can sometimes get you a little more in that heady space, and like that rumination, like
Hmm.
going over and over something in your mind, and it can be hard to get out of that sometimes. And I think those are especially the times where it's really helpful to get into the body, because then and then you can like move out of that space. You can connect with your whole self, which goes from your feet to the tops of your head, right? Like there's so many different
Right.
parts of the body that can offer information about where you are, where you are, and what you're needing. And the more that you can give
Hmm.
yourself what you need, the more
Right.
deeper you can go with your writing and with your spiritual journey as well.